streaming on Facebook. Joe Mangiacotti Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangiacotti Show on Facebook, live streaming this audio there. And so we've got a couple different ways to listen to the show. And if you go to TJMShow.com, you'll see our posts, blog posts, and all the past shows as well. All right. Good morning, Cam. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. So this is actually as I broadcast from a secure, non-disclosed location, this is the first time we've done this together. I guess there's a big delay. No? Did I lose you?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
Just
All
trying
right.
to get everything up and running.
Oh, yeah. A lot more buttons to press. Sorry about that. All right, folks. So we have a lot to talk about today. Coming up in the second hour, actually, we're going to be joined by a guest. And so Dr. Moore will be joining us. Okay, now Dr. Moore is, well, he was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and he currently sits on the board of directors of the CO2 Coalition. So we're going to talk to him a little bit because, I got to tell you, John Kerry's back out there, and he's back in the scene. And the whole Biden administration seems to be regurgitating the Obama-era people, do they not? So, we're going to get into this, but John Kerry, he's tone deaf sometimes, isn't he? He just is absolutely tone deaf half the time. And he's pushing. Remember when Biden said to a group, and I think it was in Pennsylvania actually, when he said about the refinery workers, right, and the fracking workers and the energy people, and he's saying, "Oh, no big deal. The miners in Pennsylvania, oh, they just learned how to code." I call this, right. It's elite activism, and they're so out of touch with what people want and what they want to do and how they want to live their lives, and they just are moving more and more to deciding how to live your life for you. And then John Kerry's out here telling us that, almost like Joe Biden is same tone deaf level, that's all right, just go make solar panels.
Workers have been fed a false narrative. They've been fed the notion that somehow dealing with climate is coming at their expense. No, it's not. What President Biden wants to do is make sure those folks have better choices, that they have alternatives, that they can be the people who go to work to make the solar panels.
So, first of all, maybe they don't want to go make the solar panels. And I can't believe that the pay is the same for assembling a solar panel. However, it doesn't match up with the facts and the reality of the situation, because actually solar panels and wind turbines are mostly made, guess where? China, for all intents and purposes. And they don't talk about, they want to talk about this greenness. But solar panels are not green. They require a lot of energy to make. They also require a lot of chemicals and minerals. And where do you think they're coming from? And how are they getting there? What about the miners? And if you start looking into the child labor law connected to it, you're not gonna be happy to find out what you find out. Meanwhile, Biden has put us back into the Paris Climate Accord. And the interesting thing about this, have you really examined what that is? I mean, there wasn't a set thing. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, so I don't want to get into redundancy here. But basically, and that was a great conversation, by the way. If you missed it, go check out the podcast because we had a great conversation with Miss Kerns there, who just started All America talk show, syndicated. So, but the point is that the climate accord, Paris Climate Accord, is really the countries writing up their own statement about what they're going to do, right? This thing has no teeth. It has no enforceable part to it. It's just everybody's going to write this up. What it is, it's a money grab, and mostly a money grab from the United States. So countries write up their own thing. Well, this is what we're going to do, to become more green. And they've done less than less on this. And in places like India, just wrote up what their goals are to be. And China said, oh, by 2030, right, we'll stop. Well, between now and then, they continue to build coal factories, and they'll be done by then. And India is saying at some point we'll stop rising in CO2 emissions and we'll level it off. Of course, they give no real timeline on that, and that's what they're already doing. Meanwhile, the United States, we've dropped our CO2. Rick Grinnell responded to this.
Look, I want to pick up on something that John Kerry said. He said that now we are dealing with the effects of climate change. And that's just not true, because during the Trump administration, we lowered CO2 consistently. We are actually a country that, despite not being in the Paris Climate Treaty, took the political action and the political will to lower CO2 consistently. We did that while also dramatically increasing the ability for the United States to become energy independent. This affects foreign policy, national security, because rather than buying Middle East oil in the same quantities that we have been, we're able to now export natural gas. That is dramatic. And by the way, we would not be able to have been so successful with job creation and exporting natural gas if we had listened to the radical Democrats on fracking. They told us it was unsafe, and they were science deniers.
Yeah, they were science deniers. Yeah. See, the science is follow the science when it works for us and it makes sense, not when it doesn't fit the narrative that they're putting out. All right, 508-871-7000 lines are open and available. Like I said, coming up in the second hour, we'll be joined by Dr. Moore, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, the entire situation with the Green New Deal, right? We've got John Kerry, as I said, with the gas industry workers who lose their jobs. The Biden Energy Secretary nominee, she's saying that we may have to, sacrifice for the climate agenda. So Dr. Patrick Moore, like I said, he's the author of Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. And he does deal with the environmental scare stories repeated daily in the media. He's co-founder of Greenpeace, and he now sits on that board of directors of the CO2 Coalition. All right. Enemy is within. Now, we've had Nancy Pelosi, right, come out to tell us that the enemies are her own fellow representatives in the chamber. And that's a serious accusation to put out there. But Representative Marjorie Greene, and she's from Georgia, she's a Republican, she said just yesterday that America is facing an enemy within as well. And she singled out Socialist America Last policies, and she's apparently, playing off of Pelosi's comment there. And she's referring to the opposite of former President Trump's America First agenda. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. A lot of these policies, the executive orders, are out of control, folks. Out of control. It's nearly 50 already. And the thing about executive orders, we've really got to ask the questions, are they being used the way they were meant to be used? I mean, they were supposed to be used for things like, executive order to put the colors at half-mast type of thing. They're not meant to legislate, and they're not meant to be serious policies. President Trump, moved some money around to help build the wall. But the court said, yeah, you can do that. The money's allocated, and in what he did is he took security, national security, and border wall. I mean, if it's not anything but one thing, it's for national security. That's why every country in the world has a border. You have to have a defined border. This is where our country begins and ends, right at this spot. And if you're coming over it, you need to let us know you're visiting, who you are, why you're here, how long you intend to stay. Why is this a difficult thing for people to understand? 508-871-7000. Cam, did you say we had a call?
Dawn.
Don, great. Good morning, Don from Stoughton. How are you, sir? Do we have Don?
Hello.
Yeah, there you go. How are you, sir?
Hello.
How
Hello,
you,
Joe.
do you
It's
hear me,
Don. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. No, wrong button.
Well, I hear Don Cam, so I don't. He cannot hear me, or
Dawn, can you hear me?
did he hang up? All right. Well, Cam, you can figure that out. Let
Yep.
me know. Do we have him?
Hello. Hello.
Now I'm
Hello.
hearing Don perfectly fine, but
Hello.
is Don hearing me?
Yes, I got you, Joe.
All right, good. There we go.
Joe, I got you.
Excellent. Sorry about that. A little.
Hello.
I know, right? Little technical difficulty, but we
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
We got it. So good.
Yeah.
Good morning, Don. You look marvelous,
Yeah.
by the way.
Well, thank you. Your eyes need some tuning, but that's all right with me.
I just figure it's a nice
Yeah,
thing
quickly,
to say
before I
to
get
people.
to the before I get to the climate stuff, you're talking about the executive orders.
Yeah.
Didn't that, in fact, occur when many of the states changed the election laws? They did so by dicta
Yeah.
without going through the legislature on the 5 or 6 states that changed the ballot receiving, the ballot count, the signature, whether or not it was a real address. They changed all that without the legislature. So, I mean, if it works for getting Biden elected, why can't he use it on the executive orders, Joe?
Exactly. And folks, what Don's talking about is we have states like Pennsylvania, for one, and they happen to be the states where Biden ended up with just tens of thousands of votes in the middle of the night. The count changed after they stopped counting in these states. And these are the same states that did not follow their own constitution plus our constitution, in that the way that the state votes is determined by its version of its state legislature. And it can't be changed by the Secretary of State and or the governor just unilaterally saying, okay, you know what, we're going to count votes to come in 9 days after election date. And it's just, so when you look at that and they try to tell us that there's not enough fraud, right? And Dawn, don't you love that timeline of things, right? In the beginning of the year and coming up to the election cycle, whenever we said, well, we're concerned about voter fraud, there is no voter fraud. Okay, well, let's look at these examples. We have absentee ballots being sent in before they were mailed out. How does that happen? We've got people who aren't eligible to vote actually voting. We got people who are dead voting. How does somebody who served in, say, the Civil War still voting? So when there was actually evidence produced, the line became, well, there's not a lot of it, not enough. So, of course, Don, my question is, how much criminality is acceptable? So we know it exists. And then we have...
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I have this argument with people on internet websites, and I mean, how is it that you receive more ballots from mail-in voters than there were sent out?
Yeah.
Nobody cares about that. I mean, I don't know if people remember Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was found out by a guy here in Massachusetts who did a statistical analysis of the results of Bernie Madoff's company, how well his brokerage was running. And the guy here in Massachusetts said it's impossible for these numbers to exist for Bernie to have done this. And he notified the Securities and Exchange Commissions, Joe, I know 3, 4, 5 times, and they just fluffed him off. Well, guess what? The guy was absolutely right.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no evidence. It's not hurting anyone. It's okay. People do this all the time. And he crashed the entire economy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the question here,
Yeah.
right? Because I want to just stick on the election fraud for a moment, only because the conversation I don't hear is the next part of the conversation when it comes to voter fraud. And the next part of this conversation, folks, is, okay, what if there is? And what if it's proved? And what if we determine that there was enough votes that were fraudulent and that actually Trump did win those states and therefore should have got the electoral votes. How do we handle that? How do we handle the fact, right? What's the correction to this, folks? I would love, not but I would like to hear from multiple legal scholars, because I don't think one person should have the responsibility of telling us how this should work out. But isn't that the next part of the conversation we have to have is, okay, let's for a hypothetical situation here, yes, that would change the vote in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. So guess what? Trump does have 270 or plus electoral votes. He should be president. But we swore in somebody already. Do you undo that presidency? Do we have to live with that presidency and have another election in 2024 and just deal with 4 years of the Biden administration? How do you fix it, right? This is the part of the conversation, Don. I don't hear anybody having that conversation. So let's say
no,
Trump,
Joe. I mean, you hear this all the time. But when you're dealing with courts say fraud negates all actions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a court of law, and even if the court finds you innocent or guilty, or however it rules, and the court finds out it was done so by fraud, it negates that, and you have to start all over again, or try to make the person whole whom has been robbed of justice. So in this case, Biden would be tossed out. This is my way of thinking. Biden would be tossed out. All of his rulings and everything else would be negated, and Trump would be put in, and Trump would get the extra days on the other end of his term to serve, because this is something that the nation has to correct for Trump. That's how you do it.
I follow you what you're saying, but I think the arguments on that would be, one is we've never changed, the term of the presidency is outlined in the Constitution, and I could see maybe getting, okay, Trump gets put in and finishes the days, but we did in fact swear Joe Biden in as president based on the which by the way, those electoral votes do not have to go the way the state does, right? That was the whole point. Right? Trump wanted them to go
right.
the way they think that they should have gone. He wanted the states where it was just beyond evident of the irregularities going on in the state. He wanted those states to go against.
No, you're
right.
correct, Joe. But this is the first time. This is the first time we've had such a massive mail-in where fraud was so easily introduced into the situation.
Exactly.
That is the problem, Joe. That's the problem.
And 100%, because now the question is, going forward, are we, the Democrats, I'm sure, the left is going to say, we like this idea, because of course you like it. I mean, everybody, including people on the left, from Jimmy Carter, everybody said, look, this massive mail-in ballots is just, it's absolutely the floodgates for voter fraud. And if we continue to have vote-in mailing as the predominant way of voting, the entire confidence in the electoral system, in our election process, is undermined. And when you have people who then don't feel but know that their votes don't matter, then doesn't that just lend itself to more phony votes, because real voters aren't even going to bother? If you know that the election is predetermined, and the powers to be, which would be the inner party at that point, has decided who's going to win, what are we? We're not America anymore. The whole concept of a republic is gone. I mean, that's the last. That's
no,
the
you're
last
you're
place
exactly
we
right,
have
Joe.
our power.
There's an old saying, Joe. Bad money drives out good. All right. If you can float, counterfeit money in that, you won't use gold and silver coin, because you'll never see it again. So you always use the worst money. But one last quick point, Joe, on the climate stuff. This was mentioned the other night by Mark Levin, but he noted that this is an open-ended progression that we're going to. In other words, what are the finalities of climate change? When we've done A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z, are we finished with the climate change, situation? And the answer is no.
No.
It's open-ended. every day
Yep.
something new comes along that we have to attain. The goals change day after day.
Yeah. Look
So
at-
the money keeps flowing. There.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of it to the Al Gores and the Kerrys of the world, right? The Kerrys of the world and the Al Gores of the world who have private jets, right? With individual carbon footprints that are 100 times you or me, but they're going to lecture us, right? And back to the
Right.
elite activism. See, what these people who are the elite, right? It costs them nothing to lecture us. It doesn't interrupt their life at all to put these policies into place, right? It doesn't. They're not going to feel the pinch of $6 a gallon gas, right? They're not going. They don't deal with lines. They don't deal with the stuff that we deal with. They have no idea. And I'm not being cutesy about this. Do you think John Kerry has a clue what a gallon of milk costs or a loaf of bread? Do you think he actually goes to the grocery
Absolutely
store?
not.
Okay, so they have no.
Joe, do you remember when they mocked?
Bush? Because
Yeah,
he
do you
didn't know
remember
what
when they
the
mocked
reader was.
President Bush the first?
Yeah,
You're right. He did not know what the laser scanner was on the checkout. Yeah,
and why would he?
which wasn't true at all.
You know, but
No,
the point
exactly.
Is,
and Sarah Palin could see Russia from her bathroom. You know.
oh, you know what?
And everybody still believes that.
Yeah, that had always really pissed me off because it was actually Tina Fey because Tina
Yes.
Fey did a good Palin, right? And in a skit on Saturday Night
Yes, she
Live,
did, yeah.
she said that, and people are walking around this country who think that Sarah Palin actually said, "I can see Russia from my front porch" or whatever. And it was a comedian on Saturday Night Live, Tina Fey, who does her, plays her just like, who's the jamoke that plays Trump, right? He, the wicked, his wife just got in
Yeah,
trouble.
one of the Baldwin
Yeah, the
brothers.
Baldwin, right? Because
Baldwin.
the wife got in
Baldwin.
trouble because she pretended she was Spanish. She was born, I think, wasn't she born like in Massachusetts or something? Too.
Yeah, she was born here in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Liz Warren was born in, I don't know, Cherokee, Iowa, or something like that, and claims she's Cherokee. Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Oh.
It's amazing. That's
God help us.
that's, folks, is what when we talk about low information voters, right, which is a nice way of just saying ignorant people, that's what we have to deal with sometimes. And this is these are people who get to vote. That's the irony, John, right? People
Yeah,
who
and they're going to
think
do it
these
by
things-
mail-in, Joe. They're going to do it by mail-in and be completely ignorant.
Look, the thing,
Ah.
I have said this, and I will always maintain this, and then we got to go to a break, folks, is voting should be very localized. It should be a paper ballot or chits or something. No voting counting machine should ever be Wi-Fi capable or able to connect to the internet. Nothing should be done online. It should be old-fashioned. Here's the ballots into a locked box under 2 police escorts, back to the counting room with multiple eyes on it. That's the only way. You can't hack a paper ballot, but you can hack all these counting machines and this digital stuff. It just we have to put a stop to it. We know everything that's internet connected is hackable, isn't it, Don?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. Plus, we need a paper receipt. When I put my ballot in the machine, I get a paper receipt that shows my count and the total of the previous counts.
There you
And
go.
there's a paper
Perfect.
printer
An
inside the
auditing
machine
system. You
that
got it.
counts it out and gives a hard copy, and then you have 2 or 3 or 4 memory cards. One that's removable. The others you have to rip the machine apart to get to. But I mean, yeah, there has to be something better because it's proven by Edward Solomon, a mathematician. He showed the ratios that were kicked out by the various machines in Philadelphia and in Georgia and even in Pennsylvania.
And we're against
yes,
the clock.
the
I got to
machines
break,
were
Don,
corrupted.
but actually there's an interesting thing because there's someone
All
putting
right, Joe.
together a
Later. Thank you,
fantastic-
sir.
Thank you, Don. All right, we got to take a break. We're 30 and a half minutes after the hour, folks, here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. We're going to take a quick break. Come back on the other side. I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
This is Out with Joe.
Joe, if you can see the call screen, I got it open now.
On my end?
No, I have it on mine if you want to view my screen.
Okay, so I got to send you that invitation thing again?
Yeah, if you do that, you'll be able to see the
All
screen.
right, so let me click here and continue. Got it. Open log client. And you say yes. There you go. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
AG partners have been involved with the Friendly's restaurant brand in many capacities over the years, not only as owner-operators and leaders in the system, but also as longtime.
Do you want to hear the show in the background?
Under the new ownership, the company will work to reestablish Friendly's as a family-friendly destination and introduce both new ice cream flavors and other menu offerings. Eldridge went on to say that Friendly's holds a special place in the hearts of many of its loyal patrons, and that they look forward to nurturing the legacy and creating new programs and menu items to meet the changing needs of their customers. There are 130 franchise and corporate locations. Amici is expected to retain the staff at the corporate-owned locations, but the staffing decisions at the franchise locations are determined at the local level, and they have nothing to do with that. As part of the sale process, the company filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11 in a bankruptcy plan back in 2011. Now, that closed 63 restaurants, including 5 in Western Massachusetts, Federal Street in Greenfield, East Street in Chicopee, Wilbraham Road in Springfield, Main Street in Ware, and Westfield Street in West Springfield. Over the past decade, more than 300 Friendly's restaurant locations have closed. It has opened new locations in recent years, including at the Apex Center in Marlboro. Friendly's sold its retail ice cream and manufacturing business to a Dallas, Texas-based Dean Foods company back in 2016 for $155 million. Dean sells ice cream to supermarkets and the Friendly's ice cream restaurants. Now, brothers S. Presley and Curtis Blake founded Friendly. The possessive wasn't added until years later in 1935 in Springfield, and then it grew the company quickly in the years following. The company has sold to Hershey Foods in 1979. It has changed several times in the decades since. For more dining and entertainment news, click outwithjoe.com and follow us on social media at OutWithJoe. We're suspending the Music Minute for the time being for obvious reasons. Out With Joe has been brought to you by Nothing Bun Cakes in White City Plaza in Shrewsbury on Facebook and Nothing Bun Cakes Shrewsbury. Have you heard of the hottest new bakery around? I know you heard about it right here. My friend Al has opened Nothing Bundt Cake in the White City Plaza in Shrewsbury. Nothing Bundt Cake is a bakery chain and is locally owned and operated by my friend Al. They have bundt cakes ranging from bite-sized to tiered, plus platters, candles, and cards. For any occasion, function, or just to have around the house or office, stop by and check them out. Everything is baked from scratch and on site. Nothing beats a sweet surprise. And until you try one of Al's bundt cakes, you haven't tried a real bundt cake. Stop by and ask for Al. Tell him Joe told you to stop by. 98 Boston Turnpike, White City Plaza near Planet Fitness, Shrewsbury, and on Facebook as well, Nothing Bundt Cake Shrewsbury. This is Find a Forever Home for Teddy's Friends, brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance at 306 Main Street, Douglas, and anytime at CantianiAgency.com. This week's candidate, Charlie, is brought to us by Bay Path Humane Society of Hopkinton. This handsome guy is ready to meet his new family. Charlie is an active and fun guy who is ready for adventure. He has done well with other dogs and loves to be with people. Charlie enjoys playtime, treats, hikes in the woods, and some more treats. Charlie is smart and eager to please, but will need consistency to work through his behavior. He would not do well in an apartment or with city living. Charlie needs a home with a fenced-in yard, as he is still getting used to walking on a leash. If you're looking for an active buddy to join your family, please check out baypathhumane.org. Go to Teddy Goodpup's Facebook page for links and more details. Find a Forever Home is brought to you by the Cantiani Insurance Group, with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance, at 306 Main Street, Douglas, and anytime at 508-791-2088.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
All right, folks. Welcome back to the second half, the first hour of the Joe Mangiacotti Show in the Sunday edition here on AM 830 WCRN, or affiliate AM 730 WACE. We're live streaming on the TuneIn app. Just punch in WCRN, and you can take us anywhere. Tell Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do that. And we're also streaming on our Facebook page, which all of our social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. You got the audio there, camera in the studio, and I am broadcasting from a remote location. Hey, this GameStop story isn't going away. I got to tell you that, because we're multiple days into this, right? News cycles, right? If it goes 2 news cycles, you got something there. And what's interesting is immediately you see them move into action with big tech on their side, because how dare these little old average American citizen, right, day traders, dare to use the same system that the hedge fund operators have been bilking billions of dollars. These are people. Remember, hedge fund, right? These are people who don't actually make anything or produce anything, right? They just leverage money after money, and they leverage on companies. Now, I said this yesterday. I'll say it again. Shorting a company is not illegal in itself. And saying, because all the stock market is you're betting on the futures. Whether it's gas or pork bellies, you're betting. I mean, remember that movie Trading Places? The whole thing revolved around concentrated orange juice or something like that, and they were paying to get the report early, and it ruined those 2 old guys, right? They went broke. Well, tens of billions of dollars were lost by hedge fund managers over a couple stocks, and they immediately shut down. Now, these same apps that are out there, like Robinhood and stuff, that were there, and they're look at the name of this. The name of the app is Robinhood, right? Their purpose for existing is supposed to be for people, average people, to be able to take some of this money that's out there in the rich world, right, and transfer it to them. And there was a huge transfer of wealth that took place the other day under this GameStop, and AMC Theaters was doing the same thing. But they shut the ability down for them trading, and that was wrong. And, I mean, people are speaking out, right? Actually, here's a compilation of some comments on this. It was Charles Payne, right, from the Fox Business Channel on here. Even Rush Limbaugh is on there. Listen to this. I mean, it's just out of control, really.
There once was a stock that put to sea. The name of the stock was GME. The price blew up and the shorts dipped down. Hold my bully boys, hold. Soon may the tending man come to send a rocket into the sun. One day when the trading is done, we'll take our gains and go.
Melvin Capital is now out of the stock. I just got off the telephone with Gabriel Plotkin, who runs that firm. They've taken a rather huge loss.
I still haven't heard you tell me what the fundamental case is for GameStop at $350 or AMC Theaters, which have been closed for months and months and months, is worth what the stock's trading at now.
I don't even know if there are foreign powers at work here behind the scenes trying to make chaos of our markets.
You are going to try to destroy a company by shorting 140% of its stock? You have to accept the fact that individual investors are playing the same game that you're playing, and now you're losing.
The lack of integrity in the system is the precursor that caused GameStop to be sold short 136%.
Robinhood changed the system at precisely the moment when people from outside the system started benefiting from the system.
I think it's criminal. I think there has to be an investigation. I think people have to go to jail. I've never been more convinced about market manipulation than today.
A class action suit in New York claiming Robinhood is manipulating the market. And here in Chicago, a Naperville lawyer is asking a federal judge to require Robinhood to allow its users to trade.
Well, this is really fascinating because the individual investor has rallied on a Reddit board and run over a hedge fund, which is the first time in history. Usually it's the hedge funds running over the little guys.
Just like we've got this concentration of power in so many industries, the tech companies on Wall Street too, the big banks, the big hedge funds, They don't want the competition. They want to be in control.
Here's the rub of it, folks. We are seeing one of the largest wealth transfers from the financial ruling class to the middle and upper middle class in recent memory, and it's not been authorized.
There you go. That was Rush Limbaugh at the end of it. But it's not just you. See, what's going on with GameStop stock, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, right? They've been struggling for a long time. I mean, they're a brick-and-mortar store. And the frenzy hit some new heights on Thursday, it was, right? So because of several of the trading platforms limited their customers from making trades with GameStop. And that's where I think the criminality is coming in, folks, because why? Who ordered that to happen? So in other words, on top of everything else, not that we didn't kind of already know, the stock market's kind of rigged, even though nobody truly understand how it works, but we know it's rigged because it's like we're going to a casino, right? The house is always going to win. It's all forcing hard questions, right, about whether the stock market is actually in a dangerous bubble and whether a new generation of traders should even be allowed to take full advantage of all the tools and the free trades. People are doing this, right, on their phones and their devices, right? There's tons of apps out there, tons of the no fee, low fee trading, and you've got all kinds of people doing trades, but they're usually that little individual person dealing with everything from a few hundred to a few thousand to tens of thousands won't sway the market. But when they pull together, and that's what was going on by going onto this app together, that's where the power came in, folks. That's when you have powers. When all these people were able to band together and communicate, right, on their phones and their devices, regardless of how reckless they may seem to be, the outsiders of this, right? At the same time, it champions the 99%, right? They're on the sidelines, but they're pulling together, and the hedge fund people do not like this. So that's not going away. Even Elizabeth Warren, right? She was supposed to be this big protector of us from Wall Street, but she's saying that the people who were doing these tradings and transferring money now again, shorting a company, which just means that you are saying that you will short when the price drops, right? You borrowed, I guess is a way of saying, that stock, and that's the price that they got to buy it from you at. So that's not illegal if you think that's going to happen. But if you do anything at all to make the stock the stock drop, that's criminal. That's criminal. And at this point here, if they are stopping people from being able to do their trading, why? And I think it should be looked into, and there's some criminality in there. All right, so another thing I wanted to bring up, first of all, 508-871-7000 lines are open and available if you'd like to join the conversation. You're welcome to do so. So there's these executive orders and now this package, right? Now, Biden wants to give the schools another $165 billion in the stimulus package. Now, put this in perspective. The teachers' unions tell us, hey, we got to get the vaccines first so we're protected and we can go back to the classroom. I don't want to make light of this, folks. There has been a tremendous amount of damage done to children not being in school systems, right? Being in the schools. We have a deterioration in their social skills, in their interpersonal skills. They have fallen behind because of the structures that not there. Again, we have people, the elite, lecturing us about things that they're not dealing with because they either don't have children in the school system, or they have enough money that they can hire private tutors, or they have nannies to sit there and watch their children on the Zoom classrooms, whatever. right? But the average typical family do not have those resources and options open to them. So there's been a lot of damage. We've seen that during this COVID lockdown, suicide rates have increased, alcoholism, drug addiction, domestic abuse, that's all risen tremendously during this time. But for the children, school-age children, we've seen them regress. They've lost basically a year of learning, even though there's been Zoom classes and things of that nature. So the teachers say, hey, we need the vaccination, move them to the front of the line. We do that, and then they say, no, it's still not safe. We don't want to go back to school. All right, and there's stories loaded. Go check out my Facebook page. Go check out the web yourself, right? You've got teachers on vacation and selfies on beaches and stuff, and they're complaining about the money, right? And right now, the teachers unions are basically extortion at this point, folks. So now they received $82 billion in the last stimulus package. So my question to you is, how much sanitizer in plexiglass do you think $82 billion buys you? Right? How much? So now Biden's saying, all right, $82 billion, I want to give another $165 billion for a total of nearly $250 billion. That's $247 billion to get our schools back in order. And you're saying, what are you talking about? Think about that. That's a lot of money when you break that down, right? Even if you divide that by 52, right? Just simple math. Because we have 50 states, and we'll throw in District of Columbia, Puerto Rico school systems, and not that they're all even, but we don't have the time and to get to it. I'm just rounding the numbers, right? You're talking, about $1.2 billion something per state and territory. Do you think that even, forget the billion, don't you think $200+ million should buy enough plexiglass and sanitizer for a school? It doesn't make sense, or does it? Because then you have to ask the follow-up question, right? Why? Always follow the money, folks. The two largest teacher unions, who they're behind this extortion and holding this up, not going back to school. Think about it. Two largest teachers unions are responsible for $4 million to the Democrats last year. $4 million. Republicans got just under $50,000. So it's a money laundering system here, right? We're going to throw tons of money, of taxpayer government money, to the teachers union. Teachers union's going to kick it back to campaigns for Democrats, who are the ones who got you the money in the first place. And we'll do whatever you want us to do because, hey, you gave us $4 million for our candidates last year. $4 million versus less than $50,000 for Republicans. And now they're leveraging the COVID situation and the lockdown, and they're asking for demands that have nothing to do with the teaching of the children, or getting back to school, I should say. Right? They're talking about defunding the police and things that don't have anything to do with this. They're getting political about it, and they've lost what's important, right? And that's teaching our children and getting them back into the classrooms. So now that President Trump no longer president, right, and the CDC has come out and said it's safe. As a matter of fact, it's more harmful not to have children going to school. So what happened, Joe Biden, to the follow the science, listen to the experts? Now all of a sudden That's not it. We're going to listen to the teachers union, not CDC, not the doctors, not the psychologists and psychiatrists, because we get $4 million for our candidates. So we need to have the guy. There was a parent, right? I didn't think I was going to turn this conversation. I would have had the audio for it. I mean, he just lost it at like the school board meeting. I think it was in Illinois, and saying just stop it. Get the schools open again. Vaccinate the teachers. Plus, CDC is saying, hey, the chance of children transmitting this is nil. Now, there's something else, and I don't know if you guys have caught this. It's circulating around, and what's funny is there was a mic, a hot mic. Now, a hot mic, guys, is not a mystical thing, right? It's not a hot mic in simplest term just means a microphone's on. That's all it is. A hot mic in radio and broadcasting and news gathering. Hot mic just means the microphone's open. I'm on a hot mic right now. And one of the first things they teach you in broadcast school, guys, is there is no such thing as a dead mic. When you're in a room full of microphones or a microphone, you always assume that it is on. But in the White House, in this audio, right, that I'll play, it's circulating. Now, it's not off some kind of fly-by-night website or something. This is taken, and it's been verified, that it's just a hot mic that was in the White House CV-19, the COVID-19 briefing room at the White House. And John Roberts from Fox is talking. And it's going around. And the thing about this is it is being said that they're just joking and talking about it. But they talk about the fatality rate. And the numbers that came in from California were so far off. And that when it gets down to it, that it's 0.01 to 0.3 fatality rate, which actually puts it right into the flu. So that the numbers have been skewed. So just listen to the audio and listen to the end of it when you hear him say it's basically the flu.
What's up, Johnny? All right, man. What do you know, baby? You can take out the mask, Doug. The case fatality rate's like 0.1 to 0.3 according to USC. Is it really? That's reassuring. USC. Everybody here's been vaccinated anyway. USC and LA County Public Health come out with a study. They found that there are 7,000 cases in California, but they really believe that there are anywhere from 221,000 to 442,000 people who were infected. Really? Yeah. So that makes it 0.1 to 0.3. Was a study to come out with? Yeah, just give it to them. So it suggests the case fatality rate is like 10. Wow. Which puts it right in line with the flu. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Puts it right in line with the flu. Now, there's been a lot of pushback that this is just a couple of guys who are joking, right, on this hot mic, that they were exchanging jokes and joking about this while they were in the briefing room. So it's John Roberts, and he's talking with like a news tech person while they're in the briefing room and the mic's on. So there's pushback saying it's misleading. That's they were joking. You heard the audio. If you go to my site and you watch the
5 minutes
actual video of the room, they're moving the chairs around and they're talking. My take on it is a couple guys chatting before a news briefing, getting ready for this, and here's John Roberts saying, the numbers we're being told were 7,000, but they're more, 225 to 400,000, and if you take the cases versus that number, it drops it down to 0.1 to 0.3, which is right where we are. with the flu. You be the judge. You decide on your own what that situation is. All right. I started to talk. So Marjorie Greene, who is a rep from Georgia, is kind of using the same terminology. And here we have Nancy Pelosi actually saying that her fellow members of Congress are enemies. And McCarthyism is coming in. Of course, we're seeing this right across. Anybody who voted for Trump, by virtue of voting for Trump, well, first of all, if you publicly supported him, right, they're putting you on the list. They want to remove you. Look at the movement in Harvard here. It's supposedly from students who want the diplomas and the degrees taken away from very pretty famous alumni. First of all, you can't do that. I mean, you can't take somebody's diploma away just because you don't like their political positions. And Dershowitz came right out. He said, I will, pro bono, I'll defend anybody free of charge from Harvard who they want to take the diploma away. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, said Saturday that America is facing an enemy within, kind of using Pelosi's same, language there. And she singled out Socialist America Last policies. See, and we're back to these policies that Biden is now sliding in and undoing everything Trump did. And he thinks that we shouldn't be operating from America's exceptionalism. And we shouldn't be this great country. And by using the term enemy within, Greene seemed to be responding to Nancy Pelosi's rhetoric about enemies in Congress. She said, I've said all along that we will probably need a supplemental for more security for members when the enemy is within the House of Representatives, a threat that members are concerned about in addition to what is happening outside. That's Pelosi. And then she later elaborated what she was referring to was House members who want to bring firearms into the chamber. Now, if you think about it, wouldn't you want to have some protection if you were a member of Congress? After everything from the 6th to hey, remember the softball game where Congressman Scalise was shot and almost killed? Rand Paul was attacked by his neighbor, collapsed his lung. Right? We had Maxine Waters out there saying, get up in their face. But nobody is talking about the call to violence and insurrection when the left has. We covered that before. But look, we're coming up to the 7 o'clock break. So we're going to take a break in a moment. And then, of course, when we come back, folks, we're going to be joined by a guest, and Dr. Moore will join us. And we'll talk a little bit about the climate situation. All that coming up here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show at AM 830 WCRN. Stick with us.
WACE Chicopee and WCRN Worcester.
7 o'clock.
Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti from the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Reminding you, talk radio is the immune system to the partisan, bias, political rhetoric attacking us on a daily basis. Get inoculated. The Joe Mangiacotti Show is your vaccine. Join me weekend mornings, 6 to 8.
I want to tell you what Cantiani Insurance has been able to do for me and Teddy. We stopped in to see Paul Sr. and the great staff at 318 Plantation Street. They've been handling my car and business insurance for years. Teddy was making his way around the office, and they let me know they now offer pet insurance. For a fraction of what one visit to the vet was for Teddy, they could cover him for a whole year. I know you treat your furry family members like any other family member, and as well as I do Teddy. The professional staff at Cantiani's has been providing courteous service for over 40 years, with integrity and personalized service, making sure that your insurance actually protects you and your family. With 2 locations, the 318 Plantation Street in Worcester and East Douglas Insurance Agency, located at 306 Main Street in Douglas. For home, auto, business insurance, and now pet insurance, click CantianiAgency.com or call 508-791-2088. 508-791-2088.
Are you getting the doctor online?
Golden Group Roofing is a community brand. From our master lead roofers and industry partners to our clients, every single person represents the Golden Group standard. We strive every day to make your home's needs a priority because Golden Group invests in you and your communities. With unbeatable craftsmanship, customer satisfaction, reasonable pricing, Golden Group Roofing stands above the rest. Having been awarded GAF Master Lead Contractor, Certainty Select Shingle Master, and GAF Energy Certified Solar, Golden Group Roofing is 100% worthy of your investment. Experience the Golden Group difference, where hands protect what matters most. Visit us at goldengrouproofing.com or call us at 508-873-1884. 508-873-1884.
Hi, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. You know me from my radio shows and on-air contributions. But beyond that, I'm the president and owner of a second-generation private investigation firm, CIS and Associates, based right here in Massachusetts. The security and investigation industry has changed in many ways my father didn't even imagine when he began the agency over 3 decades ago. Private security and private protection is the fastest-growing segment of the private security industry. Personal private protection is a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business. At CIS, we have a specialized sector, the Template Division. This is the department tasked with the security and protection of individuals, often in cooperation with government agencies. But we offer highly trained and experienced body people for executives, government officials, and their families. If you are in need of a highly specialized service, I'd encourage you to reach out to CIS and ask for the Template Division. You can call us directly at 508-296-5445, 508-296-5445, or email newenglandinvestigators@gmail.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here at AM 830 WCRN, our affiliate AM 730 WACE. Of course, we're live streaming on the TuneIn app. Just punch in WCRN. You can take us anywhere. Tell Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do that, and we're also live streaming on our Facebook page at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running. That's 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. All right. As promised, we're going to bring into the conversation, so let me invite into the conversation Dr. Patrick Moore. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Doctor.
Morning, Joe.
There we go. Dr. Moore.
How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us and getting up early on a Sunday morning. I greatly appreciate that. Now, Dr. Moore is the author of the book Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. Now, you had a little something to do with Greenpeace as well, and currently on the board of directors of the CO2 Coalition. So first of all, give us the elevator explanation as to what the CO2 Coalition is, Doctor.
Joe, the CO2 Coalition is a group of top scientists, engineers, and economists who believe that carbon dioxide is being vilified unnecessarily here and that it's costing a fortune to do so, even though it is the most important building block for all life. All of the carbon in carbon-based life, which is us and all the rest of life, comes from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the oceans. And the idea that it is some kind of pollutant or toxic is purely political and is being used to gain power over the population and to manipulate us into going back into some kind of dark ages by giving up the most important energy source we have in the whole planet, and that is fossil fuels. And we think that people should recognize that CO2 is entirely beneficial. And aside from that, the whole idea
of going back to a time before fossil fuels, people should think about that. Our wealth, our happiness, our freedom, and our long lives have depended on using these fuels for energy. Energy underlies everything we do in life, and the more expensive energy is, the more expensive life is. So that's just a short version. I've been studying environment and ecology for 50 years. I'm a PhD ecologist from back in the day, and it's sad for me to see science being abused in this way.
Absolutely. You know something, Doctor, right? And sometimes maybe I just like to simplify things and look at things like apples and oranges, and I see this whole, Paris Accord, climate accord, and climate change. And when I was a kid in school, they were warning us about acid rain, right? Here you are, third, fourth grader, and you think that acid rain's going to fall, and that like every time it rains, you're going to get burned. It's going to burn the clothing off you. Of course, acid rain never came to be how they scared us in elementary school about it. But what we learned, or what I learned in grade school, is plants and trees, right? They breathe carbon dioxide, and they put out air, O2, and we breathe that in, and that the planet is this marvelous, incredibly balanced organism, in that our life exists in harmony with the planet, and it needs our CO2 to survive, and we need the O2 to survive, right? So wouldn't that just make sense? And then I wonder about this oil, right? The vilified oil in fossil fuels. But if the planet is such a brilliant, incredible balance of the ecosystem, are we not supposed to be using oil? I mean, it continually seems to get replenished, right? They capped off these wells in Pennsylvania years ago, and now they're bubbling over again. So what is the science? Why is CO2 rather, considered to be dangerous when we have tons of greenery taking place because of the level of CO2? Or am I just totally misunderstanding that?
Well, no, you've got the life cycle and the present circumstance pinned down pretty good, Joe. The fact of the matter is that the Earth is greening because of our carbon dioxide emissions. And the idea that there's something wrong with that is just crazy. We have been using fossil fuels for some time, but it's since we started learning how to frack these seams of shale down and deep in the earth that we're going to now have gas and oil into the future much longer than we thought. But back to the Paris Agreement, which is a purely political instrument to gain power at the global level. You got Russia and China and India, none of whom believe in this thing at all. They know that it's fake, and they are moving forward with building nuclear power plants. And if we really actually wanted to replace some of the fossil fuels for electricity, for example, almost all our electricity could be produced with nuclear energy. And people in the West have been led to fear nuclear energy, even though it is one of the safest technologies that's ever been built. Not one human being has been killed by nuclear energy in the United States in the plants that are making the electricity. 99 of them, I believe, at last count. There were once 104, I think, and that was at the peak. The United States is only building 2 new nuclear plants and has rules that make it twice the cost of what it is in China, India, and Russia. All 3 of those countries are moving forward with nuclear energy. So that's one aspect of this thing. But, it's just nuts to bow down to this. It is wrong, absolutely wrong, that fossil fuels are a problem. Fossil fuels are organic. They are made with carbon. Organic chemistry is the chemistry of carbon, the chemistry of life. And they were made with sunshine. All of the fossil fuels were made from plants and plankton, plants in the sea, which fell to the bottom of the ocean and made the oil and gas. And on the land, the coal was made from the forests. So we're looking at sunshine, 100% renewable at the time. Life made fossil fuels, and they call it dirty. Like, what do they mean dirty? Dirt is where we grow our food. There's nothing wrong with dirt. And so they're using dirty as in dirty, rotten scoundrel.
Right.
So as a swear word to put on the front of oil, dirty coal. You know, they talk about it. It's not dirty. It's the most incredibly versatile form of energy that we have in our whole world. And the Chinese and in India, their CO2 emissions are skyrocketing. And I don't blame them, because they're developing their countries to try and be at sort of the same kind of level we are, which I don't blame them for. And at the same time, the United States is the only major industrial country that has reduced its carbon dioxide emissions, is actually living up to what would be the Paris Treaty, but it's not right for the citizens of the United States to punish themselves over this when CO2 is actually one of the most positive things there is in the world. It's why life is here.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So I'm right in thinking that, because my thought process on this has always been, I don't know. It seems like it's very natural, and the Earth is producing this, and that it seems like we're meant to use it, and because we have discovered it and figured out how to use it, we have had the industrial age, and we have the technology now, and medicine has increased, and human life expectancy has increased. Everything's increased. So now it does seem it's totally a political power grab. And I've been saying this, the Paris Climate Accord it's not even something, from what I understand, what I've read about this, Doctor, is every country kind of wrote up their own thing. This is what we're going to do. In India, in China, in Russia, they just put what they were doing anyway, in being very vague, that at some point somewhere down the line we'll stop producing it, but not today. And here they clip it together and they say that's the climate. They have no teeth, no enforcing power. Meanwhile, the United States has done better on reducing our CO2 emissions than the Paris Climate Accord would call for. But what they want is money from us. They want a ton of money, and they want to kind of cripple our businesses and our industry so that we can't be the best that we can be. So this seems very, very strange, right? It does seem that it's about a power grab. And then Biden is now talking about this quasi Green New Deal with a $2 trillion price tag. We're bankrupting our...
You could build yes. You could build a lot of nuclear plants for $2 trillion, and they would be so much more efficient than the subsidized crony capitalism, which is wind and solar energy, expensive and unreliable. It wouldn't exist if it weren't for the tax breaks and the tax credits and the subsidies and the mandates. They force utilities to build wind and solar facilities. But let me get to the theme of my book, if I might, Joe. It's called Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. The key word in it is invisible. Fake, of course, is pretty important, too, because it is totally fake. But when you said about acid rain, you couldn't see the acid rain. You can't see the carbon dioxide. You can't see the radiation. You can't see all the things that are going on by invisible factors that people are telling you stories about, narratives as they call them, which is a word that actually belongs in fiction, not in science. And then you've got things which are really remote, like polar bears and coral reefs, and they're saying they're going to die. Why are they going to die? Because of invisible CO2, so it's a double whammy there. Not only is the thing that's causing the so-called problem invisible, but you can't see what it's doing, because the polar bears and the coral reef, well, the coral reefs are underwater, far away in the tropics, way offshore mostly, and the polar bears are all around the Arctic Circle. How many Americans are going to go up and count the polar bears? And so you've got a situation where they can make up any story they want, and here's the clincher. the public, therefore, and people have to think about this, because if you haven't observed something for yourself, you should be skeptical about it. And when you have the activists, the media, the politicians, and the scientists on serial government grants for this climate change scam, you've got all these people with a huge stake in you believing their story. And that's not right for it to be so lopsided. There has to be a counterbalance to that of people who are saying, just a minute here, this thing is invisible. How do you know what it's doing? Give me the proof of this. And then you find out that the polar bears and the coral reefs are perfectly healthy. That's in my book. Has 11 chapters of 11 different subjects. Let's just take GMOs, for example, the dreaded genetically modified organisms. They're not organisms, they're plants. They're plants and they're part of our food chain. And the thing is that whatever is in the GMOs that is supposed to be bad for you must be invisible, because no one has ever shown us on a plate or under a microscope this thing that they say is wrong with these foods. But there's even worse. It doesn't have a name. Oh, and it doesn't have a chemical formula of any kind. Now, all gases, liquids, and solids, in other words, everything has a chemical formula, whether it's the table or the fire or the air or the water or whatever. We are made of chemicals. And if it doesn't have a chemical formula, then they don't know what it is. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist if they don't know what it is, because we've got powerful instruments to measure everything in everything. And so they are just lying that there's something wrong with these foods, which are being used with science is being used. Genetic science. It's a fantastic science, and it's being used to make them better. Do you think seed companies would make seeds that don't work as well or don't grow as well or don't produce as nutritious a food? No, because they'd be blown out of the water by people who did. So this is the problem in the world today with the scare stories. People are using fear instead of hope. And the United States has gone from hope to fear just recently, from what I can see. They're trying to scare the public into being afraid to talk. On Twitter now, I see it. There's a chill because people are afraid to open their minds and speak their minds anymore because they're afraid they're going to get banned. And
worse, Doctor.
That's the kind of social atmosphere.
Right? It's not even getting banned. They go after your job. They go after your livelihood. They go after the company you work for and say, well, how can you have this person working for you? They don't think the way I do. I mean, that's what's happening there. And as far as and this is the interesting thing, you brought up a great point here, is we've been told over the last decade, 2 decades, right? If you go back to earlier presidential campaigns and so forth, that we had 12 years and we have 15 years, and they keep changing the goalposts. And there's no consequence on that side for those scare tactics, right? And they're trying to scare us into behavior they want, but it doesn't happen, right? Manhattan was supposed to be underwater by 2012, if you go back to 2000, and now this past election cycle we have 15 years. It's all over, right? Including our champion of the climate, President Obama, who bought a mansion on Martha's Vineyard on the ocean. Now, why would you do that if the oceans are rising? So they keep using scare tactics and telling us all this, but when the time comes for the end of the world they promise us, they just move the goalposts down the timeline a little bit. And that's okay.
Well, hopefully something's going to give here, because I learned from my mom that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And I think the vinegar's being used in ample quantity right now to make people believe that there's a bleak future, a dark winter is coming. That kind of language and making it look as though there's a national emergency, that there's going to be a civil war, and all the nice people who go hunting for deer every year are going to become militia. This is what's being told on the news. The actual, it's not news anymore. It is is terrible to the level to which it has sunk. And I just really believe that people will come out of this realizing that hope for the future. I mean, we don't know the future, but it's better to hope for the best and work towards the best than it is to fear the worst and work towards the worst. If you cut off your whole energy supply, like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah.
And this is a very important time in history right now, not just for the United States, but because the United States is the biggest economy and such a target for all the rest of the world. It's important that we look inwards right now and look for hope for the future. That's why the book has two titles. Fake and visible catastrophes are things that they say are already happening, like the so-called climate catastrophe. There's nothing unusual about the weather in this world compared to the last 10,000 years. And then threats of doom is things they say are definitely going to happen in the future. All the polar bears are going to go extinct, and the coral reefs will all die, and the world will shrivel up, that sort of stuff. And that's about the future. And we should not fall for future scare stories, like AOC saying we've only got 14 years left, which is now 12 years or 11 years or something. Like you say, those things have never come to pass. It's actually more than 30 years they're predicting the end of the world because of climate change. And the climate is still just about the same as it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, folks, we're talking with Dr. Patrick Moore. He's the author of a book called Fake and Visible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. It's available on Amazon. The link is on my Facebook page. I think also on the Twitter account. I'll make sure they're up there to go straight through it. You have 11 chapters exposing the many environmental scare stories repeated in the daily media. And one of the ones is the weather, right? Every time there's a hurricane or we have a cold snap, there are news outlets that are saying we've never had hurricanes like this before. These are of a new power, a new force that never existed, right? We didn't used to have it. And then if you just do a little surfing on the internet and go to the National Weather Center and a few other places, you find out that's a crock. We've had powerful hurricanes for as long as we've been recording them. And we've had cold temperatures and cold snaps. So has there been any true anomaly in our weather that we didn't have 80 years ago or 100 years ago?
Absolutely not, Joe. Even the United Nations Panel on Climate Change says that. And then the activists and the politics and all those people just ignore that. They only take what the IPCC says that's good for their narrative, and they ignore what doesn't work. And the fact of the matter is people forget about the weather for 2 years ago, never mind 100 years ago. And so it's really easy to fool people into thinking the latest flood or the latest drought or the latest storm is the biggest and baddest that ever existed on the face of the earth. Look at the cold snap that's coming across to the eastern U.S. today. This is a big cold snap. It's come from Arctic air. It gets cold up at the North Pole this time of year, and sometimes that air makes its way down here. And it has been happening since the beginning of time. Well, actually, in the beginning of time, or not quite that far back, we've only been in this cold climate that the Earth is in now for the last 2.5 million years, which is nothing compared to the history of life and the history of the Earth, which goes back billions of years. And if people would only study the history of the Earth, we know a lot about the history of the Earth, especially back about 500 million years or 500 million years when modern life emerged in the Cambrian explosion, before which it was all unicellular and in the ocean, just little tiny things you couldn't even see. And pretty soon, though, like 500 million years ago, after 3 billion years of life being pretty boring, it emerged into multicellular life in the sea and eventually came on the land. And we have marine sediments that have chemistry in them that we can go back and look at what the temperature was 100 million, 200 million years ago. This is all known, and we're actually at the tail end of a 50 million year cooling period out of what's known as the Eocene thermal maximum 50 to 55 million years ago. The Earth was so much warmer than it is today. Not at the equator, where the temperature doesn't change much, but towards the poles, mainly the heating occurs there when the Earth warms up. And it wasn't that long ago, if you understand that 3 and 5 million years wasn't that long ago in geological time, that all the Arctic islands of Canada, which are basically barren today of trees because it's so cold, they were all forested, and giant camels were roaming in them. You can look it up. It's actually in Wikipedia. I mean, it's on the internet. All of this history is there for people to unfold and see for themselves. But they're listening to propaganda every day, day after day, on CNN and MSNBC and NBC, and all the rest of the fake news are bought off and paid for to give them a scary scenario for the future. And it's our children that they're scaring now. That's what really makes my blood boil. When they bring out kids like Greta Thunberg and start preaching to the young people that the world is coming to an end. Young people are very vulnerable about fear and scare stories. That's why they made up all these fables that you'd tell kids when they went to bed that had a little bit of a scare in them, because they're easily frightened, and they are frightened now that the Earth is coming to an end, because they're being told that it is every day of their lives practically by adults in all different walks of life, whether it's teachers or politicians or activists, Greenpeace people. Greenpeace turned into a racket peddling junk science. That's why I left it after 15 years. I spent 15 years doing good work, saving the whales, stopping toxic waste, stopping the baby seal slaughter, stopping nuclear testing, and then when we'd won, they just kept on going, and then they ended up having to make up things in order to have a fundraising campaign to support their large payroll. And as I say, it went from people with noble intentions, volunteers back in the day and set in the early 70s, to a business that had to raise money, and then it basically degenerated into a racket peddling junk science.
Well, like everything, right? Once they got a little power and a little money, nobody wants it to go away, right? Hey, we got this money, we got this power, and Greenpeace got to a level, right, that they were taken at one time very seriously, and you, like you said, you did great work. When did Greenpeace start? When did you start that? What was the origin of that?
Greenpeace started in Vancouver, where I was doing a PhD in ecology at the University of BC, because of the U.S. hydrogen bomb testing in Alaska, which had been done in the atmosphere in the South Pacific until the treaty was signed in the 60s to take it underground. And so the U.S. decided to test its hydrogen bombs halfway out the Aleutian Islands, where actually, except for Alaska, it was closer to Japan, Russia, China, and Canada than it was to the United States.
Right.
And so we in Vancouver, because of the huge earthquake in Alaska, I joined this little group in a church basement called the Don't Make a Wave Committee because of the tidal wave that had been caused by the Alaskan earthquake. We said maybe this 5 megaton hydrogen bomb is going to cause a tidal wave coming across the Pacific at us.
Actually,
and we sailed a boat to stop those tests, and that became Greenpeace.
Yeah, Dr. Moore.
And I spent 15 years with them.
All right, that's right. So we're against the clock, and plus we have a caller, Joanne, who Joanne, I just realized you were there. Can you hold through the break? Can you stay with us, or do you have to leave?
I already got up, and it's 4 a.m, so I might as well stay here, Joe.
I didn't realize you were in that time. I double thank you for joining us so early. So please hold on through the break. We want to continue to hear what you have to say. Plus, we'll take a call from Joanne. You're listening to the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Dr. Moore is with us, and we'll be back in just a moment, folks. Stick with us here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Good morning and welcome to Case Files from the LPDAM, where we take a look at the lessons from the actual cases, the law behind the findings, and where we share the experiences of the experts of the Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts. Joining us this week, is Sean Burke, current president of LPDAM and resident manager of Courtside Legal Investigations. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Joe.
Well, welcome back to Case Files. I can't believe a month has gone by so quickly.
It's been an entertaining month, to say the least.
On top of everything else, absolutely. You know something? We often look at court cases, right, from 1,000 feet above, and sometimes we forget the people involved and how they may be looking at their cases on that ground level.
Joe, I'm glad you brought up this topic. I had a client say to me this week how he is a victim of his situation where he is currently being criminally charged. He is a defendant in a domestic case. These are always tough situations for a police officer to assess when responding to a 911 call. Many men feel they are not treated fairly when a domestic allegation arises where the police are involved. This may or may not be true, but either way, he is in the defendant's chair. I understand his frustration, but it is a major reason why we have trials. As a social worker and a private investigator, I understand why people often feel wrong. With that said, I encourage my client to be proactive, acknowledge the relationship may not be a healthy one, and for us to find a way to get a positive outcome. It is possible, Joe.
Well, I find your approach in the court so interesting, having this combination of the social work and private investigations, how they intertwine and they benefit society. It seems like a natural fit for many people who are involved with court cases.
Joe, services like mine are designed to solve 21st century everyday problems. They focus on the root of the problem by including all parties, by utilizing a court case to help people be better citizens, avoiding future criminal dockets, and being better Americans. I think it is something we all strive for, and some need a little bit more help than others. I have the most rewarding job on earth. I love it. I give a lot of credit to the judges who are invested in a better community and the partnering lawyers who see their clientele as humans. I am fortunate to have such wonderful experiences with my work alongside the courts.
Well, Sean, I can see why you received a Martin Luther King Award. We need more people finding creative ways to solve societal problems that have existed for well over a century.
We really do, Joe. I am glad to be a part of a solution that is working. It puts a smile on my face every day. It is an opportunity most of my clients have taken advantage of and choose to live better lives, be better citizens, and enjoy all America has to offer, while society has less victims and lower recidivism rates. It is a win-win situation all around. At lpdm.org, we have an investigator for you. Whether it's an asset check, a surveillance, or you've somehow been wronged, an LPDM member business is a trusted source to expose the truth. Remember, you're in good hands with LPDM.
Well, you certainly are. Sean, thanks again for stopping by. You always have great tips and information for us.
Thank you, Joe.
And thank you for joining us for Case Files from the LPDAM. Join us here each week on WCRN 8:30 a.m. and online anytime at lpdamcasefiles.com. Visit lpdam.org, and you can find LPDAM on Facebook and Twitter at PI in Mass, and anytime at 800-955-6274. For Sean, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. This is Find a Forever Home for Teddy's Friends, brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance at 306 Main Street, Douglas, and anytime at CantianiAgency.com. This week's candidate, Charlie, is brought to us by Bay Path Humane Society of Hopkinton. This handsome guy is ready to meet his new family. Charlie is an active and fun guy who is ready for adventure. He has done well with other dogs and loves to be with people. Charlie enjoys playtime, treats, hikes in the woods, and some more treats. Charlie is smart and eager to please, but will need consistency to work through his behavior. He would not do well in an apartment or with city living. Charlie needs a home with a fenced-in yard, as he is still getting used to walking on a leash. If you're looking for an active buddy to join your family, please check out baypathhumane.org. Go to Teddy Goodpup's Facebook page for links and more details. Find Your Forever Home is brought to you by the Cantiani Insurance Group, with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance, at 306 Main Street, Douglas, and anytime at 508-791-2088.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
All right, folks, welcome back to the final segment of the Joe Mangiacotti Show at AM 830 WCRN. Our affiliates live streaming on the TuneIn app. You can tell Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do that. And we are live streaming on our Facebook page at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. Also, our handle for all our social media platforms, including Parler, if and when that ever comes back. Our guest today is Dr. Patrick Moore. He's the author of Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom. There's 11 chapters in there exposing the many environmental scare stories, those that are repeated daily in the media. And you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. Again, thank you, Dr. Moore. I didn't realize what time zone you were in. That's very early, and I absolutely appreciate the fact that you're getting up to join us. And so is Joanne. Joanne would like to join the conversation as well. Joanne, good morning. You look marvelous. And Dr. Moore is on the line with us.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Oh, it's so good to hear from you, Dr. Moore. I couldn't agree with you more. To cut down trees, which take the carbon dioxide and then produce oxygen, to cut down trees to put up plastic solar panels from China, it's just such madness. And then they are a pollutant in themselves. They're going to get dumped in our oceans like all plastic does. It's just terrible. Why are people so ignorant about all this? Well, I know why, because of all the fake news on everything. And then the other thing about the polar bears, they take these pictures of the polar bear on an ice floe. You're supposed to think, oh, this poor thing, he's out in the middle of the ocean. No, he's catching a ride. Polar bears are the best swimmers in the mammal department. He's catching a ride, and when he gets tired, he'll jump off and swim right there to shore, which is a couple of feet away. And polar bears, of course, they sleep during the cold winter, and they don't get up till spring. That's why it shows the ice melting. Right, Doctor?
Well, the thing about polar bears is quite fascinating. They actually have the nickname sea bears because they are such good swimmers, and they can swim for miles. But the point is that 1.2 million human beings drown every year. It wouldn't be unusual if a few polar bears drowned because they're in the sea. They're by the ocean, and the sea is a harsh mother. And fishermen die in the sea. People die on ferry boats going across the straits when a storm comes up. So they use this to make it look as if all the polar bears are drowning, and it's not true. The other one is National Geographic showed an emaciated old polar bear in the summer, so there's no ice, no snow on the ground, so that reinforces the myth that the snow is disappearing from the Arctic, which is not true. And they say this is the face of climate change. That is the headline. This is what climate change looks like, a starving polar bear. Well, actually, the main cause of death of polar bears is starvation because they have no predators. They are a top predator. So when they get old and lose their teeth, and they just plain get old, there are no nursing homes for polar bears. And they have to die in the wild, like wild species do.
Circle
it can
of life.
be a sad thing to look at. Yes, but they've lived a long life. Yeah. And the polar bear population, what most Americans don't know, or people anywhere in the world don't know because nobody's telling them, is in 1973, because wildlife biologists saw that the polar bear population was declining due to overhunting. It became easy to fly to the Arctic, find an Inuit guide, and get a big rug for in front of your fireplace. And so a lot of hunters were doing that, and it was unregulated. And so all the polar nations signed a treaty in 1973 to stop unregulated hunting in the Arctic. And since then, the population has grown from somewhere around 8 to 10,000 to an average guess estimate of 38,000 polar bears. And there's so many polar bears because the seal population has also grown because of the ice going away a bit in the summer. You see, the whole Arctic covered in ice all year would not be a good thing because the ocean is where all the food comes from in the Arctic. There's hardly any plants growing up there. It's so cold. So in the ocean, you have your plankton and your fish and your seals. The seals are what the polar bears are depending on for their main food supply. And seals are abundant in the Arctic right now, and so are polar bears. But it's partly because they stopped shooting them all. And yet they're blaming it on carbon dioxide and climate change, when actually it's one of the greatest conservation success stories in the 20th century. But nobody can see that for themselves. This, again, is the point of the book. And I just encourage everybody to just read it. It's only 200 pages. It has a lot of references if you want to go deeper into all of these subjects. But the book itself will prove to you that you are being lied to about these issues being the end of the world. Right. It isn't true. The world is actually in quite a healthy state, greening up because of the CO2 we're putting into the air.
Well, like everything, Doctor,
Yeah.
right? You need to have the facts on both sides of the story. I'm sorry, Joanne, go ahead for your last question.
Well, and getting back to the bugaboo about carbon and carbon being essential to life, look what they did with sugar. Now, sugar is a simple six-chain carbon molecule, and its sister glucose is what they give you in hospitals if you're dying. There's nothing wrong with sucrose or fructose or lactose if you eat too much of anything. But no, they make it so that sugar is a poison, while they push out poison like acetaminophen, which is a poison, and now they're admitting it. And they did the same thing with aspirin when they were coming out with acetaminophen, which, as we know, is a product that begins with T and everybody takes it. Tylenol. They went on a thing where they absolutely said aspirin is bad for your stomach. No, it isn't. It isn't. It's the greatest thing. It's all natural. And but acetaminophen, they're finally admitting that is a poison, that gives you cancer. Correct, doctor?
Well, you know, the amazing thing here is that I'm focused on the environmental issues that are invisible and remote and that people can't see for themselves and have to depend upon the people who are making all the money on these scare stories. But nutrition is very similar. We cannot see what's going on inside our bodies, and therefore we are susceptible to all the quackery in the world out there with ads saying don't eat this, don't eat that, whether it's avocados or something else. They've all got these fake stories about what's happening inside our bodies, which we can't observe. And so if you got a stomach ache or you got some pains, you're susceptible to these quacks because they say they can fix you or make you, lose 20 pounds. Well, why is it legal to say up to 20 pounds?
Yeah.
Because up to includes an ounce, and all these diet ads say you can lose up to so much weight in a week or a month or a year or whatever. That's phony. Up to doesn't mean anything.
Well, Doctor, I mean, that when we get into the nutrition part of it, too, again, it's back to follow the money. I always say follow the money with everything. Look at the hemp plant, right, and marijuana. People, now it's becoming legal in states and things of that nature. And what really happened with the hemp plant, it actually goes back to William Randolph Hearst, who didn't want his timber rights affected because the hemp plant can be grown, harvested, used to make so many things, and then replenished very quickly, unlike a forest can. So he, with his publications and political ties, he wrote stories about lazy Mexicans and how bad it was, and got Congress to pass it. So that's a whole nother discussion when we get into the pharmaceutical and all of that. But Joanne, thank you very much for the call. Great questions. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Again, we're talking with Dr. Patrick Moore. Joe in Worcester would like to join the conversation as well. Good morning, Joe. Thanks for calling. Dr. Patrick Moore is on with us.
Good morning, Dr. Moore. As a native Worcesterite, I see the changes that occurred, the landfill that once where we would dump everything, paint cans, tires, and then it would just be put into the landfill. Now on top of that landfill off of Greenwood Street are solar panels that are generating electricity for the city's grid. And then I travel out to Natick and Framingham near TJX with these solar panels. I'm not saying that can replace the gasoline, petroleum products, and natural gas, but it can supplement. And then I see wind turbines or in the area of fully named that generates electricity. But my contention is this: the water is more pure, the air is more pure in Worcester than it was in the 60s when I was a young boy, when it was a factory town, when you had Warner Swayze, Wyman and Gordon at Kelly Square. Now you're going to have a baseball stadium at Kelly Square. So you have the major employers being the medical facilities or medical facility affiliated facilities. And because of the Environmental Protection Agency regs that came into existence in the 1970s during the Nixon administration, and certainly he was no progressive, you have much purer air in the city of Worcester. I remember the silt in the air, when there were no regulations on factories, or when dye would be dumped into the Nashua River from the mills of Fitchburg, when we were heavily reliant upon mills, upon factories, as major employers of the factories of either Worcester or even surrounding communities. It's like a microcosm of the United States. And there's the sulfuric acid or the sulfuric rain that was affecting the trees from the coal-generated electric plants. You have that plant that's down in Somerset that was closed down. I don't know if they're going to utilize it for some other purpose, but you see that even though people are very averse to environmental regs, I find the air of Worcester much cleaner than it was in my distant youth, being a 60-year-old man who survived cancer and gone through chemo treatment.
You know, you're absolutely right, and that was the work we were doing back in the 70s and 80s to clean up the air and the water around the world. And that job has been largely accomplished in the industrialized countries. China and India are still in catch-up mode, but because we pioneered the ability to clean the air and water of toxics from our factories and power plants, they are catching up faster than we did because we've already set the example. And this is the thing. But when you talk about landfills, one of the great wastes we are doing in this world, in this part of the world, is putting all our combustible waste in landfills. Plastic, paper, and wood in particular, and food waste, which can be also composted. But the paper, plastic, and wood can be burned in a factory that has good pollution control, which is called waste to energy. In Europe and Japan and China, there's a lot of this. In Western Europe, there's almost no landfills, and the same with Japan, because they're using this materials to produce power. In Europe, the whole of Europe, 8% of their electricity is coming from waste. And I see that in the Twin Cities, there's a waste-to-energy plant. On Long Island, there is a waste-to-energy plant, but there's not enough of them in the United States, and that's because the green movement is against them. Is actually, you know, when you come right down to it, the so-called green movement is against fire. They are against combustion. They're against fossil fuels. They're against burning wood. They're against burning waste. They're against burning everything. And fire was actually how civilization kind of began back then, like hundreds of thousands of years ago, when humans harnessed fire for keeping their homes warm and cooking their food. And now we're told we should stop using fire, and we should only use wind and solar energy because they don't like nuclear plants and they don't like hydroelectric dams. So you're left with really expensive, subsidized, crony capitalist, unreliable energy. And that's why blackouts are happening in California and in Australia, because they built up these wind and solar situations that have completely destabilized the electrical grid. When there's a power demand, the power's not there, and it blacks out. And that's going to happen everywhere we do this. Germany's electricity has gone up by 3 times in cost, and same with Denmark, because they've gone holus bolus into this wind and energy scam. And if it wasn't, as I said earlier, if it wasn't for the subsidies, the tax credits, and the mandates, there wouldn't be any wind and solar energy. It would be being produced by reliable, cost-effective technologies that are clean. And, you know, why are these people against even hydroelectric energy? I mean, it's the cleanest there is, and it can be scaled up and down with the load factor. I mean, it's a perfect source of electricity on good sites. But hydroelectric is not universally applicable. Saudi Arabia is flat and dry, so it doesn't work there. But nuclear works everywhere in the world. And, only less than 60 actual deaths are attributed to nuclear energy accidents in 60, 70 years of 440 nuclear reactors around the world. Only one nuclear reactor caused civilian death, and that was Chernobyl, which was a stupid design reactor that the Soviets built behind the Iron Curtain back in the day. And those are never going to be built again because they had a property that made them go critical. In other words, Chernobyl was a slow nuclear bomb, whereas 3 Mile Island didn't even hurt anybody, and there were no deaths from Fukushima from radiation, and people acted as though the end of the world, just like with climate change. So, there was a headline on CNN during the Fukushima incident that said, "Nuclear crisis deepens as bodies wash ashore," as if the nuclear plant was causing the bodies to wash ashore, when in fact it was the tsunami that caused both the nuclear accident and the 20,000 deaths of people who were killed in the tsunami. And it's 3 Mile Island was nothing. It was just a hiccup. It happened that Jane Fonda made a scary movie about nuclear energy, the China syndrome, just before that happened, and so everybody went into a panic about it. And Fukushima did not kill anyone, not a single person, and yet they made it seem as though it was the end of the world.
Interesting. Joe, I think you make a great point, but we've done so much.
One more point.
Yeah.
One more point. We have the Wheelabrator plant in Millbury that does burn waste, so it now no longer is the material being put into the ground. It's under regulations. The smokestacks have technology remove the impurities, and we burn a lot of waste in the Worcester region, quite frankly. There are incinerators like the Wheelabrator that burn the waste. I don't know if they use that energy for any other purpose, but they do burn a lot of waste material on the Millbury-Worcester line, quite frankly.
Yes, but 50% of U.S. waste is still going into landfills, and in Western Europe, it's almost none. It can be done. Everybody, China's building the biggest waste-to-energy plant in the world right now. I think it's 1,000 megawatts or something like that. It's one big plant, and they actually are leading now. They're leading in so many factors that the United States needs to take a look at them as an example in many ways. Their system of government is not the most wonderful thing in the world, but they do have very good technology. They are very well organized, but they have some questionable practices. That's a big problem.
Yeah. Joe, thank you very much for the call. Great questions and great points to be made. And that's exactly what you started out doing, right? Doctor was cleaning up and stopping the negative things that were happening. And now we have just this false narrative out there. So, I have no problem. I like wind. I like solar. I think that they should be used when they're available and as a secondary type of thing. I live near a wind turbine, the one up by Holy Name. I can see it. I mean, it's fine. I had neighbors when it went up that had a problem with it, and I didn't. I thought it was kind of a cool thing to watch, but I wouldn't want to be dependent on that for everything. So it's fine to have solar, right? I mean, there's no negative to solar. There's no well, there is negative actually to the panels, right? The panels have a lot of chemicals and minerals that we have to mine and put together. So there is kind of a downside, but we don't hear a lot about that, Dr. Moore.
No, the fact is, Joe, if it wasn't for the subsidies, tax breaks, and exist. What happens with solar and wind is everybody pays a little more for their electricity, and two people get a mansion. It's a crony capitalist scheme.
Yeah.
And
on
the kind of thing. I just learned yesterday that the billionaires in the United States increased their wealth by 40% during the pandemic.
Yes.
What about the working people?
Yep.
How many working people have increased their wealth by 40% during the pandemic? So these kind of
prior to the pandemic, I was going to say, is the actual blue-collar worker, right? Their wages were increasing, and the unemployment was record low prior to the pandemic. I mean, so it was a good economy for the typical citizen out there. But I wanted, before we ran out of time, talk about President Biden's energy secretary nominee that he's put forth is Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm. The Senate has to confirm, I guess she still has to do with that. But she's saying that, some American jobs may need to be sacrificed in order to pursue this ambitious environmental agenda. So here we have again, okay, and Joe Biden did exactly the opposite of what he stood in Pennsylvania and told all those workers he was going to do. And they're saying, get rid of all these jobs, get rid of all of these, the pipeline gone, right? Drilling in the Gulf gone. And they're supposed to be replaced with these solar panel jobs and wind jobs. And they don't have them yet. I mean, so they're going to sacrifice people's livelihoods and jobs when, in fact, it's not doing the level of damage that the media is trying to tell us is happening. And I just thought I'd ask you a comment on what Governor Granholm is saying about sacrificing these jobs for this ambitious environmental agenda of Joe Biden's.
Well, it's not only jobs that are being sacrificed. Wind energy in the United States kills over 80,000 predatory birds, eagles, hawks, and owls, etc., every year. And this is the Smithsonian telling us this. It's not some wild-eyed eco-creep. It's actually the Smithsonian Institute with real scientists who are telling us this. And the thing is, though, is that wind and solar can never be the primary source of electricity, because the sun goes down, the clouds come over, the wind stops blowing. And so every time you build a wind farm or a solar farm, you have to have something to back that up. And the cost of the backup is not being included. And the problem is the backup is usually a gas plant, and then the gas plant has nothing to do when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, so it has to shut down. So it even makes the gas more expensive. It is a zero-sum game. Wind and solar are great off the grid. I have actually a home in southern Baja in Mexico that has a solar system in it because there's no electric wires running to this little village of Cabo Pulmo on the Sea of Cortez in southern Baja, California. And so there it makes sense, because the only alternative if you're off the grid is a gas or diesel generator, which is noisy and needs fixing all the time, and you have to run it 24 hours a day, and it's expensive too.
Yeah.
But so is solar. When you have to have batteries to back up the solar, because you sort of want electricity when the sun goes down, and that means batteries, because the solar panels don't work at night, and they don't work when it's really cloudy. So because I'm a person who has had 20 years experience with an off-grid solar system and have studied the way this has happened in the United States and Europe, where these solar panels, most of which are being made in China, are, and that's why I don't think there's going to be hardly any increased employment for Americans except in installing them.
Doctor, I'm sorry,
But the fact of the matter is
we're running out of time, Doctor.
They are a parasite on the larger economy.
Doctor,
Yes,
we're
Joe,
against the
sorry
clock.
Time goes by.
Yeah, it does go by.
Yeah,
And thank
okay.
you so much for getting up so early and joining us. Please come back at another time, because you're making tons of sense.
30.
And this is great information. And again, your book is available on Amazon. I've got the link up on my social media platforms. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Joe, and I'll come back anytime.
All right, excellent. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hey, we've got that cold snap coming in, folks. Take care. I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
WACE Chicopee and WCRN Worcester. 8 o'clock.
You just may have the best podcast anywhere.
Blah, 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 blah.